The airport was crowded early that morning, the bright lights buzzed overhead, and the steady hum of travelers filled the air. Jasmine stood in line, waiting patiently with her worn-out backpack slung over one shoulder. Her clothes were simple, a plain hoodie and comfortable jeans, nothing that stood out. Around her, people shuffled forward, some tapping their feet, others checking their phones, all eager to get through security and on with their day. But something felt different for Jasmine. While most travelers were quickly moving through the line, she noticed several TSA agents looking her way more than usual. Their eyes lingered longer than they did on others, scanning her from head to toe. The looks weren't friendly or curious, they felt sharp, almost suspicious. She could sense the weight of those stares, even though she said nothing. Jasmine took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She wasn't a stranger to attention like this. Still, the feeling of being singled out made her stomach twist. Today's trip wasn't supposed to be stressful, it was just a flight like any other. Or so she hoped. Jasmine finally reached the front of the security line. The officer in front of her scanned her boarding pass and then looked up, his eyes narrowing for a moment. Without a word, he motioned to a nearby officer. Jasmine's heart quickened. "Step over here, please," the first officer said, his voice calm but firm. Jasmine nodded silently, and followed him to a small area off to the side. Around her, people stopped and stared. Whispering started quick, soft voices filled with curiosity and judgment. She could feel their eyes on her back. The second officer joined them, glancing at Jasmine with a serious expression. "We need to ask you a few questions," he said. Jasmine kept her face calm. She had been through this before, being stopped, watched, questioned. The questions came quickly. Where was she going? Why was she traveling alone? What was in her bag? She answered each clearly, not giving them a reason to doubt her, but she could hear the doubt anyway. "Can you step aside and open your bag for inspection?" the officer asked. With steady hands, Jasmine unzipped her backpack. She emptied out the contents onto the table: a worn Bible, some protein bars, a travel-sized shampoo, a pair of old sneakers, nothing suspicious. But the officers still looked unconvinced. One of them leaned in, eyes sharp. "Do you have any other ID?" Jasmine's throat tightened. She hesitated for just a moment, then reached into her jacket pocket. This was the moment everything might change. The officers exchanged glances, their whispers low but tense. One of them muttered something about Jasmine not matching her profile. It was a phrase she'd heard before, a coded way to say she didn't look like what they expected. The words felt heavy, like a judgment hanging in the air. Jasmine's hands were steady as she waited, but inside, her heart was pounding. Why was she always the one they watched, the one they questioned, the one they didn't trust? One officer leaned closer and asked again, "Do you have any other identification, something official?" Jasmine nodded slowly and reached deeper into her jacket pocket. Her fingers brushed something cold and smooth. She pulled out a small, worn card, a military ID. The officers' faces shifted immediately. The suspicion in their eyes was replaced by surprise. One of them took the card, turning it over carefully. Her name was printed clearly on the card, Lieutenant Jasmine M. Carter. For a moment no one said anything. Then the female officer among them gave a quiet, respectful nod. The male officer straightened up, his tone softer. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said. "We didn't realize." Jasmine felt a mix of relief and frustration. She wanted to say something, to tell them what it meant to be stopped like this every time, just for how she looked. But the words caught in her throat. Around them, the people waiting watched silently. Some shifted uncomfortably. The tension in the air seemed to lift a little, but the sting of suspicion still lingered. This was more than just a random check. It was a moment that revealed so much more, about who Jasmine was, and about the world she moved through every day. As the officers quietly discussed, Jasmine's mind drifted back to where her story really began, long before this moment at the airport. She was just 17 when she enlisted in the military. Growing up in a tough neighborhood, life hadn't been easy. Her grandma raised her, working long hours just to keep a roof over their heads. Jasmine had seen things no teenager should have to see. People often looked at her with doubt, because she was young, because she was a black girl trying to do something big. Joining the military wasn't just a choice, it was a way out, a chance to prove herself, to be strong when the world told her she wasn't enough. Training was brutal, she pushed her body and mind every day, fighting not just the challenges of boot camp, but also the whispers and sideways glances from those who didn't expect much from her. She earned her rank, her respect, and went on to serve 2 deployments overseas. She carried the weight of responsibility, protecting people she didn't even know. She saw things that changed her: pain, loss, bravery, and hope all tangled together. But today, she wasn't a soldier on a mission, she was a granddaughter rushing to her grandmother's side. The hospital call came late last night. Her grandma had suffered a stroke. Jasmine had booked the earliest flight possible to be there, to be the family she always promised she'd be. She thought about how many times she'd faced suspicion just for walking into a room or sitting in a chair. How often her identity was questioned before her character was even seen. That military ID wasn't just a card, it was a symbol of every struggle, every victory, and every time she had to prove who she was beyond the surface. Back in the airport, the atmosphere shifted after the officers saw Jasmine's military ID. The tension in the room was still thick, but now it carried a different weight. One of the male officers straightened up, trying to break the silence. "Didn't expect to find a soldier here," he said, forcing a small, awkward smile. Jasmine nodded politely, but said nothing. Inside, she felt a mix of relief and sadness, relief that they no longer saw her as a threat. Sadness that it took a military ID for them to respect her. The female officer, who had saluted Jasmine earlier, stepped forward softly. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. Jasmine blinked back a sudden rush of tears. "I will be," she whispered. A kind stranger nearby, who had been watching quietly from a distance, approached. She leaned in and whispered, "Thank you for your service." That simple phrase hit Jasmine harder than she expected. She swallowed hard, and a tear slipped down her cheek. It was the first time someone said it with kindness instead of suspicion. For a moment everything around her seemed to slow down, the noise of the airport, the rushing travelers, even the flashing lights. She let herself feel the weight of everything she'd carried for so long, the fear, the judgment, the strength. But she also felt a quiet hope. Maybe things could be different. Maybe the world could see her for who she really was. She wiped her tears quickly and squared her shoulders. The flight was boarding soon, and she still had a mission, this time a personal one. As Jasmine gathered her things to head to the gate, she noticed something that made her pause. Nearby, a teenage girl was being stopped by security. The girl looked scared and confused, clutching her small backpack tightly. The officers were asking questions, and the girl's eyes darted around nervously. Jasmine felt a familiar ache in her chest. She saw herself in that girl, the fear of being judged, the worry of not being believed. Without hesitation, Jasmine stepped forward. She pulled out her military ID again, and showed it to the officers. "She's with me," Jasmine said softly, her voice steady but kind. The officers glanced at her with surprise, but nodded. Jasmine turned to the girl and smiled gently. "You're okay," she said quietly. "You're stronger than you look." The girl's eyes widened for a moment, then a small smile appeared. "Thank you," she whispered. Jasmine watched as the girl's shoulders relaxed, and the tension in her face eased. In that moment, something shifted. Jasmine realized that while the world might judge by appearances, kindness and understanding could break through. As she walked toward the boarding gate, Jasmine felt lighter. She wasn't just a passenger on a plane, she was a soldier, a protector, and someone who could help others carry their burdens too. The noise of the airport faded behind her, as she stepped onto the plane, ready to face whatever came next. Jasmine's story reminds us all of something important. People are much more than what we see on the outside. Behind every face is a whole life full of struggles, strength, and stories we may never know. She wasn't suspicious. She was brave. She was dedicated. She was carrying invisible battles and victories that no one could see at first glance. Too often, judgment comes too quickly, based on the way someone looks, their clothes, or where they come from. But Jasmine showed us that real strength is quiet and steady. It's not about fitting a profile, or meeting someone's expectations. This story is a call to look deeper, to pause before judging, and to remember that every person deserves respect and kindness. The world is full of people like Jasmine, people who serve, who protect, and who fight to be seen for who they really are. So next time you see someone who seems different or suspicious, remember Jasmine's military ID on that airport table, remember the courage behind the face. And most of all, remember to see people for what's inside. The full story outline, and all story sections are complete. If you'd like, I can now combine all parts into one smooth script for your faceless storytelling channel, keeping the pacing natural and engaging. Or I can help you with narration tips, suggest background music styles, or even write a compelling intro hook. What would you like to do next?